After years of helping support the household, oldest daughter is kicked out for refusing to pay for her spoiled younger sister's college. Amanda had always been recognized for her strength and determination. From a very young age, she demonstrated a maturity that set her apart from other children her age. At just 16, when most people were still discovering the early steps of adulthood, Amanda already carried a weight that few could bear. As the eldest daughter of a humble family, she learned early that effort and sacrifice would be constant companions on her journey. The house where she grew up was modest, but full of responsibilities. Joseph, her father, worked long hours at a grueling job that, while providing the basics for survival, never offered comfort or financial security. He was a man dedicated to his work, but emotionally absent. His tendency to avoid confrontation made him almost invisible during moments of family tension. Lisa, her mother, focused her energy on domestic duties and the care of her daughters, but she showed clear favoritism towards Laura, the youngest. This imbalance was a wound that Amanda felt but rarely commented on. Lisa made sure to treat Laura with near-exclusive attention, shielding her from responsibility and allowing her to grow up surrounded by privileges. Laura, in turn, didn't seem to notice or care about the efforts of others. Amanda silently observed how her younger sister led a light and carefree life while she sacrificed her dreams and personal desires to meet the needs of the household. At 16, Amanda entered the job market to help supplement the family income. At first, she believed her contribution would bring relief to her parents and better conditions for everyone. However, what should have been a shared effort soon became a constant obligation on her shoulders. It was as though, little by little, her dedication was taken for granted and not recognized for the sacrifice it truly was. Joseph, in his passivity, rarely intervened, while Lisa seemed to consider Amanda's dedication a responsibility as the eldest daughter. Years passed, and Amanda's routine became exhausting. She balanced work and school, always striving to maintain good grades and dreaming of a future where she could finally prioritize her own ambitions. But despite all her efforts, the demands at home never eased. On the contrary, they seemed to grow every day, as did the indifference of Lisa and Laura towards Amanda's fatigue. Although the young woman maintained the resilient attitude for which she was known, there were times when she felt deeply exhausted. Her routine was a constant battle to balance responsibilities that in many cases shouldn't have fallen solely on her. While Joseph and Laura lived without major concerns and Lisa concentrated exclusively on caring for the home and the youngest, Amanda had little or no space to think about herself. This unequal dynamic and the weight of so many expectations gradually drained her energy and her dreams. One morning, Amanda woke up early, as usual. Feeling her body weighed down by accumulated fatigue, she got up and headed to the bathroom to prepare for another workday. After washing her face and tying her hair back, she went downstairs. The smell of fresh coffee, mixed with the sound of lively voices coming from the kitchen, filled the house. Amanda entered the room and saw Lisa and Laura sitting side by side at the table, focused on a cell phone. They were enthusiastically discussing possible colleges for Laura. "Good morning," Amanda said, trying not to show the exhaustion she carried. "Good morning," Lisa replied, without lifting her eyes from the phone. Laura murmured something inaudible, more interested in a virtual catalogue of courses she was scrolling through. Amanda sighed, accustomed to the indifference. She sat at the table, served herself a piece of bread and some coffee, and began eating in silence. Meanwhile, Lisa excitedly pointed to the screen. "Look at this one, Laura. It has a wonderful campus, and the exchange programs are amazing," Lisa said, almost with a gleam in her eyes. Looks good," Laura replied, uninterested. "But I think I prefer this other one my friend mentioned yesterday. It sounds more like me." Amanda continued chewing slowly, glancing at the two of them from the corner of her eye. No one addressed her, as if her presence were invisible. Used to it, she quickly finished her meal, placed her cup in the sink and grabbed her bag. "I'm leaving," she said, more out of formality than expecting a response. "Go with God," Lisa said, still not looking away from the screen. Laura didn't respond. Amanda left the house with a lump in her throat. The cold morning wind made her hunch her shoulders as she walked to the bus stop. No matter how hard she tried to ignore it, the feeling of being neglected by her own family followed her like a shadow. The day at work was long and tiring. Her tasks seemed to multiply, and the weight on her body and mind only grew as the hours dragged on. At the end of the workday, exhausted, Amanda returned home. As soon as she entered, she headed straight for the bathroom. The hot water from the shower was the only moment of relief she found throughout the day. Wrapped in steam and the muffled sound of water, she closed her eyes for a moment, trying to push away the thoughts that haunted her. After getting dressed, she went downstairs to the kitchen. The dinner table was set and the family was already seated. Joseph ate silently, while Lisa and Laura seemed more animated, just like in the morning. Amanda sat down and began to serve herself. During the meal, Lisa finally spoke to her eldest daughter. "Amanda," Lisa said in a tone that suggested the seriousness of what was to follow, "when we're done here, I need to talk to you about something important." Amanda raised her eyes, surprised. Normally, Lisa didn't speak to her in that serious tone unless it was to ask for something big. "Sure," she replied, trying to sound neutral. After dinner, Joseph, Lisa, Laura, and Amanda headed to the living room. Lisa cleared her throat, hesitating for a moment before beginning to speak. Joseph was beside her, wearing an expression that blended exhaustion and submission, as if he already knew what the conversation would be about. Laura, leaning against the counter, appeared unconcerned. "Amanda," Lisa began, carefully choosing her words, "we are very proud of what you've done for this family. You've always been the most responsible, the hardest working. You've always sacrificed for all of us." Amanda felt a chill run down her spine. Something in those words seemed wrong. Lisa continued, with Laura distractedly looking at her phone. "As you know, Laura is finishing high school and is already thinking about which college to attend," Lisa said, trying to keep a sweet tone. "We believe she has a bright future ahead, but for that, she's going to need help." Amanda crossed her arms and remained silent. Something inside her already predicted what was coming. "Your father and I have talked a lot about this," Lisa continued, glancing quickly at Joseph, who only nodded, avoiding eye contact. "And we think it would be fair to ask for your help in paying for Laura's college. After all, you know how tough things are for us." The shock hit Amanda like a lightning bolt. She blinked several times, trying to process what she had heard. Her heart began to race, and the silence that followed was deafening. Joseph stayed silent, while Lisa looked at Amanda with expectation, as if she were making the most reasonable request in the world. "Of course, we know this is a big commitment," Lisa quickly added, sensing the blank expression on Amanda's face. "But look, Laura deserves this chance. She has so much potential, and in the end, it's an investment in her future, in the future of the family." Laura finally lifted her eyes from the phone. "Yeah, Amanda," she said almost casually. "You always said you wanted me to have a better future, right?" Amanda felt her throat dry. Her head seemed to spin as Lisa and Laura's words echoed over and over. Lisa finished with an almost rehearsed softness. "Think about it, dear. We're counting on you." And so, the silence returned. Amanda stood still for a few moments after Lisa's words echoed in the kitchen. The absurd request seemed surreal, as if she had misheard. She looked at her mother, at Laura, who had a slight smug smile on her face, and at Joseph, who simply looked down at the floor. Finally, she took a deep breath, trying to control the emotions that began to bubble up inside her. I can't do that, Amanda said, her tone calm but firm. Lisa raised her eyebrows, as if surprised by the answer. What do you mean you can't? Amanda, you've always helped this family. You can't refuse now when we need you the most. Amanda closed her eyes for a moment, trying to find the right words. I've always helped. Since I was 16, I've worked tirelessly to put food on this table. I put my dreams on hold so that everyone here could have a little more comfort. But this, paying for Laura's college, it's not my responsibility. I can't do it. And to be honest, I don't think it's fair. Laura let out a dry laugh, full of contempt. Oh, you can't? Or you don't want to? Because it sounds more like you're being selfish. Amanda felt her blood boil, but kept her composure. Selfish? Do you have any idea what it's like to work every day, give up everything you want, just to see your family do well? No, Laura, you don't. Because you never had to lift a finger in this house. Amanda! Lisa exclaimed, her face filled with indignation. Don't talk to your sister like that. Laura is young. She's about to start her life, and we're just asking for your help. You've always been the most mature, the strongest. Why can't you do this too? Amanda shook her head, incredulous. Because I've already done more than enough, Mom. I spent years sacrificing my dreams, my health, my life for all of you. And what do I get in return? Indifference. You don't even look at me when I speak. I'm just the one who works and pays the bills, nothing more. Lisa stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. That's not true. We've always been grateful for everything you've done. But you're exaggerating. Laura needs you now and you're just refusing. How can you be so insensitive? Insensitive, Amanda repeated, feeling the tears starting to form. Insensitive is never asking me how I am, never thanking me for anything, never caring about what I want or feel. I'm just an obligation to you, and you don't even hide it. Laura crossed her arms, her tone turning even more bitter. Oh, poor Amanda. Always the victim. Maybe if you were less bitter and more understanding, things would be different. But no, you just know how to complain. Joseph opened his mouth as if he were going to say something, but then closed it again, unable to intervene. Amanda looked at him, hoping he would say something in her defense, but he stayed silent, looking at the table. The disappointment was an even more painful blow. Enough, Amanda said, her voice breaking. I'm not doing this. This conversation ends here. She turned and ran to her room, finally letting the tears flow as she closed the door behind her. She threw herself on the bed, feeling the weight of everything she had said and heard. She lay on her side, staring at the wall, the word selfish echoing in her mind. How could her own family be so cruel? How could they disregard everything she had done for them? The lump in her throat seemed to suffocate her, but emotionally drained, she eventually fell asleep amidst the tears. The next morning, Amanda went downstairs, feeling the weight of the argument from the day before. The atmosphere was heavy. Joseph was sitting at the table, silent as always, and Lisa and Laura looked more serious than usual. She was about to sit down when Lisa raised her hand, signaling that she wanted to speak. Before you sit down, Lisa said, standing up slowly. We have something to say. Amanda froze mid-motion, feeling a chill run down her spine. Something in Lisa's expression and the silence that filled the room made her heart race. Lisa took a deep breath, as if preparing for what was to come. What you said and did yesterday was unacceptable, Lisa began, her voice thick with harshness. We've always been a family, we've always stuck together, and we expected you to continue helping us like you always have. But apparently, you think you're better than that. You think you can just refuse to help your sister and continue living here as if nothing happened? Amanda furrowed her brow, beginning to understand where this was going. Lisa continued, her tone growing colder. A selfish and arrogant person like you doesn't have a place in this house. We have no more room for someone who doesn't care about the family. Therefore, you need to pack your things and leave." The impact of her words hit Amanda like a punch in the stomach. She stood still in shock, trying to process what she had just heard. "What?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "You heard me," Lisa said, showing no emotion other than contempt. "You can pack your things and leave. This is no longer your home." Amanda looked at Joseph, hoping for some kind of reaction, but he kept his gaze fixed on the floor as if he wanted to disappear. Laura, on the other hand, watched the scene with a small, satisfied smile on her face. "Are you really kicking me out?" Amanda asked, her voice trembling. "After everything I've done?" "Yes," Lisa replied firmly. "It's what needs to be done. Now, go." With no strength to argue further, Amanda nodded slowly, her eyes filling with tears once more. Without saying another word, she turned and went upstairs to her room. She packed a few clothes into a bag, taking only the essentials. Every movement felt like a ton of bricks. Before leaving, she took one last look at the room where she had spent so many years, her heart aching. Downstairs, she saw them all still in the living room. Joseph remained silent, Lisa stood with her arms crossed, and Laura was on her phone, as if nothing were happening. Amanda looked at them one last time, but no one said a word. With a broken heart, she opened the door and left. The first days away from home were the hardest for Amanda. Sitting in the small room she rented with the little money she had saved, she felt an immense emptiness. The pain of being rejected by her own family was almost unbearable, but mixed with it was a new feeling. Freedom. For the first time, there was no one demanding anything from her, no one asking for more sacrifices, more effort. Despite this, the silence of loneliness was a new weight she had to learn to carry. On the first night, while staring at the ceiling of her room, tears silently streamed down her face. She remembered Lisa's harsh words and Laura's smug smile. She felt anger, sadness, and more than anything, a deep exhaustion. But as the days passed, a thought began to emerge timidly in her mind. Perhaps this was a new beginning. Perhaps, by being forced to leave, she would finally have the opportunity to put herself first. Meanwhile, at her family's house, Amanda's absence was immediately felt. Tension hung in the air the morning after her departure. Joseph, who had remained silent until then, seemed more defeated than ever. Lisa, on the other hand, insisted on justifying her actions. "She only thought of herself," Lisa said while organizing the breakfast table. "It was obvious she didn't want to be part of the family anymore." "That's ridiculous, Mom," Laura retorted, never taking her eyes off her phone. "Amanda has always been like this. Now she's on her own. Let's see how long she can handle it." Joseph, who was sitting at the table with his hands crossed, looked up at the two of them. "You really think Amanda was the one who was wrong?" he said, his voice firmer than usual. "The girl dedicated her whole life to supporting this house. You kicked her out like she was nothing." Lisa frowned. "Joseph, please, she made her choice. Nobody kicked her out. We just showed her that if she couldn't contribute, maybe this wasn't her place." Joseph shook his head, frustrated, but didn't say anything else. Deep down, he felt a huge guilt. The words he had failed to say to Amanda echoed in his mind, and he knew he had failed his daughter. As days turned into weeks, Amanda began to rebuild. With her newfound freedom, she threw herself fully into work and studies. With the money that used to go toward supporting the house, she managed to enroll in a professional course she had always wanted. Her routine was intense, but for the first time, she felt that every effort was made for herself. At work, she began to stand out, receiving praise from colleagues and supervisors, which boosted her confidence. In parallel, the situation at her family's house began to show clear signs of deterioration. Without Amanda's financial help, the bills started piling up. At first, Lisa tried to minimize the severity of the situation. "We can tighten up here and there, Joseph," she said, while reviewing the household accounts. "It's not that hard. We just need a little more organization." Joseph, however, knew that the reality was harsher than Lisa wanted to admit. Basic expenses were becoming difficult to cover, and the financial burden fell entirely on him. The exhaustion from work, combined with the increasing demands, was beginning to wear down his patience. "Lisa," Joseph said one night, taking off his shoes after another long day, "I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. You need to cut back on spending. Laura also needs to understand that we can't live like we used to." Lisa huffed, irritated. "I'm doing everything I can, Joseph. Don't blame me. Amanda left the house, not me. She was the main help. And now you want me to manage alone with this?" Joseph sighed, trying to stay calm. "I'm not blaming you, but we have to be realistic. Without Amanda, the income has dropped a lot, and Laura still acts like she's not affected by any of it." Laura, who had been listening from the hallway, entered the room, her face filled with boredom. "Are you talking about me again? Why is everything suddenly my fault?" "Because you're not doing anything to help Laura," Joseph shot back, his voice starting to rise. "You lived like nothing ever affected you. Your sister supported this house for years, and now you need to start pulling your weight." Laura crossed her arms and rolled her eyes. "I'm not changing my life because Amanda decided to leave. She was the perfect daughter, wasn't she? Maybe you should have treated her better." Joseph stood in silence for a moment, his daughter's words echoing in his mind. He knew Laura had a point in some ways, but he couldn't bear her dismissive tone. Lisa, sensing her husband's silence, intervened. "Stop talking to your father like that, Laura," Lisa said as she picked up the dishes from the table. "He's doing the best he can. And Joseph," she continued, now turning to him, "there's no use shouting. You know it's no one's fault. Amanda made her choice." But Joseph couldn't accept it. "You think it was her choice? Lisa, she was pushed out of this house. You never treated her the way you should have. It was always about Laura. Always." Lisa paused for a moment, surprised by the accusation. "I always treated both of them equally," she replied, though there was hesitation in her voice. The arguments became more frequent. Without Amanda's financial help, Joseph was constantly pressured by Lisa and the demands of the house. He began to withdraw more, preferring to stay at work longer to avoid the endless arguments at home. The bills began to pile up. The electricity was cut off for a day before Joseph could pay the debt, and the tension in the house reached unbearable levels. Laura, who had never had to deal with hardships, began to show signs of frustration. "Why does everything have to be so hard now?" she complained one night. "It wasn't like this when Amanda was here." Joseph couldn't hold it in any longer. "And why do you think it was different? Because your sister did everything. You never had to worry about anything because she carried this house on her back." Laura made a face and stormed out of the room, slamming her bedroom door. Lisa looked at Joseph disapprovingly. "You didn't have to speak to her like that." "Didn't I?" Joseph responded, his voice full of exhaustion. Maybe it's time she heard some truths. The following months brought even more wear and tear. Lisa began selling some of the household items to pay off mounting debts. Laura was forced to look for a job, but her lack of experience and arrogant attitude made the process difficult. Meanwhile, Joseph grew quieter, absorbed in his own thoughts. Then one night, after yet another heated argument with Lisa, he sat at the kitchen table, his hands on his face. When Lisa entered, he looked up at her and with a firm voice said, "I can't take this anymore, Lisa." "Can't take what?" she asked, exasperated. Us, this house, the arguments. I failed Amanda because I never had the courage to confront you and Laura. But I won't fail myself anymore. I want a divorce." Lisa was speechless for a few seconds before responding angrily. "You're saying this because you want to run away from your responsibilities, Joseph. That's what you always do." "No," he said, standing up. "I'm doing this because I can't live like this anymore. I'm leaving this house." In the days that followed, Joseph packed his things and moved into a small apartment. Lisa was left alone with Laura, and the consequences of both their choices began to worsen. Without Joseph's support, the debts grew. Laura eventually found a job, but it was poorly paid and made her realize how much Amanda had sacrificed for her. Lisa, in turn, became bitter and isolated, constantly replaying the events that led to Amanda's departure and the disintegration of their family. The house, once supported by Amanda and Joseph's efforts, became a place marked by absence, frustration, and regret. Meanwhile, Amanda flourished. After months of hard work, she was promoted at her job, and the course she had started opened doors for new projects. She made friends who supported her and even began to go out more, experiencing things she had never had time to enjoy. Little by little, the weight of her family's rejection gave way to a feeling of fulfillment and pride. One day, while returning from work, she received an unexpected call from Joseph. Her father's voice sounded older and more remorseful than she remembered. "Amanda, I wanted to apologize," he said, struggling. "I was a coward. I should have defended you. You didn't deserve any of what happened." Amanda took a deep breath, emotional, but responded with maturity. "Dad, I suffered a lot too, but I don't hold a grudge anymore. I just hope you find your peace, just like I found mine." The call ended with words of reconciliation, and Amanda felt a lightness in her heart. As she moved forward, Lisa and Laura faced an increasingly difficult reality. Without money and support, their constant arguments pushed them further apart. Lisa isolated herself, bitter and resentful, while Laura, without the comfort of home, struggled to rebuild her life. In the end, Amanda found her happiness away from that toxic environment. She became a respected professional, cultivated a simple yet fulfilling life, and was finally able to dream and achieve without limits. Joseph, meanwhile, spent his last years trying to make amends for his mistakes and found some peace in his solitude. As for Lisa and Laura, once so dependent on Amanda's sacrifices, they reaped the consequences of their arrogance and negligence, living lives marked by regret and emptiness. And so, Amanda moved on, knowing that the weight she once carried no longer belonged to her. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, give it a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. See you in the next story.